views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening. Welcome to BronxTalk. This is a very unusual circumstance. Obviously, we can't go into BronxNet Studios. And so literally all of the hosts, me and David Lesh and Rena and Bob and Darren and all the other people who produce BronxNet programs are doing them wherever we can do them. And I'm actually in my home, in my Bronx apartment. And we are simply going to carry on. We thank our producer, Helen Greenberg, and Michael Max, and all the other people on the BronxNet staff who have worked really hard to make sure that the borough keeps getting served by its public station. And we're going to literally continue on. So that's all I'm going to say about that. And say good evening and welcome to our guest, Senator Gustavo Rivera of the 33rd Senatorial District. Nice to have you with us, sir.
Good afternoon, evening. This is playing in the evening, correct?
Yeah, we're shooting in the afternoon. Let's be fair.
Good evening. Let's make it seem like like we're there live on the studio. Good evening. I just walked in from outside, and boy, is it dark.
So I will, just for our audience's sake, the 33rd District includes Kingsbridge Heights, Kingsbridge, Fordham, University Heights, Van Ness, Tremont, East Tremont, and parts of Marsania and Parkchester. So, Senator, let's just start from the beginning. First of all, where are you? And then we'll go from there.
Well, I am currently in my office in Albany. We had a session scheduled for this week for 2 or 3 days. We only had 1 day of session, but I have found myself very involved in very much like immediately after the storm in Puerto Rico, when Puerto Rico had the hurricane, I remember serving in this capacity, kind of trying to connect resources with each other immediately after the storm. So I find myself in the same place. I couldn't get out of here before today, but I will hopefully go back home to the Bronx for a couple of days before we come back to vote on the state budget at some point in the next 4 to 5 days. I need to get some supplies and such, but I find myself in Albany right now, and we'll be going back to the Bronx probably this afternoon.
I think before we even talk about the obvious subject matter, just give us how's the Senate doing? Do you have meetings? I mean, much like we're doing a video conference, are you getting together? Is there, of course, concern about the budget? And I'm sure there is, yes. But give us an idea about what the mechanics are in Albany.
Well,
right now.
we wanted to observe social distancing protocols, which are absolutely essential right now. Everyone who's watching, that is incredibly important that you observe those protocols. So we wanted to do the same. When we finally got together for a conference, we usually are together in a conference room. Instead, we picked a hearing room, and we would sit like 5 chairs away from each other. And so all the senators were basically spaced out in an entire hearing room that can hold a couple of hundred people. And there were 30 some odd of us, 40 of us, with some staff in the front, but we were all separated from each other by like 6 feet at least. And when we went to the chamber, we would usually be in the chamber. There's 63 of us. And we know the CDC, not requirements, but suggestion that no more than 50 people get together in a room. So that would have not been possible. We changed the rules. We got some agreements with the minority so that at any time, there would be only 2 to 10 people in the entire chamber. The 2 floor leaders, the presiding officer, some clerks and what have you. So in a room that usually has on a slow day 100 people in it, there were maybe 10 people in it. This was on Wednesday when the session was actually held.
I had done an interview with Councilmember Richie Torres, who has tested positive. It's been widely reported. I understand there are some state legislators who also have tested positive. Do you have any word on that, and any further thoughts about some of your colleagues who may be personally going through even more than the rest of us are going through?
Well, first of all, I send my positive thoughts to Richie. You'll, I hope, get better real soon. As far as state legislators, I know that up until today, there are 3 assembly members that have tested positive. These are at least the ones that we know of. There are currently no state senators that have tested positive, at least to my knowledge. It is, it goes to show you this is something that is going to impact. I mean, we have to be real about the situation that is before us, and I know we're going to get into it. But at some point, experts that know far more about this than either of us tell me that 60 to 70% of people in the country are going to be in contact with this at some point. So
that is unbelievable.
Yeah, and so currently no senators up to my knowledge, but it'll likely happen at some point soon. It is less likely to happen once we go back to our respective districts and we shelter in place, if you will. We will deal with that after we pass a state budget, hopefully in the next couple of days.
I guess let's get into it. How is this state doing in your estimation? The governor has been very prominent. I think he's received accolades by a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
I realize nothing is perfect. None of us have gotten it solved. But all things considered, how is New York State doing?
So let's talk about first about the things that have not happened well, and let's be clear and very honest here. There was an utter failure, a tragic failure from the national government. There was not enough testing done quickly enough. We have had this orange pile of feces in the White House suggesting that he needed to keep the numbers of cases low, and so he discouraged testing, etc. That is going to cost lives, and they're going to be at his feet. Let's be clear about that. As far as New York, we have moved more aggressively than other states. I was just, as I'm looking at you in a laptop, my desktop is over here, and I had the press conference that the governor just did on, what is today, March 20th.
We're shooting it on Friday the 20th. That's correct.
Yes, so March 20th is today, March 20th at 12:02 p.m. The governor just announced that there will be a kind of a shelter-in-place type situation, quote-unquote lockdown in the city of New York because of the cases that because we're testing as many folks as we're testing, we see that New York is the epicenter of this. And I'm very, very concerned because I do not believe that we acted swiftly enough. Some of it was not our fault. I think that in the circumstances, and listen, that I'm not necessarily a fan of the governor many times, and there's some things that I can still criticize about him, but in this moment, considering the sociopath that we have in the White House and frankly the mess that we have down in City Hall, he has been more decisive than most executives, and he has acted aggressively to establish parameters that will hopefully be able to have us hit less. But I'll be honest with you, I'm severely concerned. I believe that as of today, we are 6 days out, probably 4, from seeing the healthcare system collapse in the state of New York.
Well, that was definitely going to be my next question. Mayor de Blasio called on the president to establish the War Powers Act and to bring in the military so that we can get further support. But let's start with supplies. I mean, I was thinking even for myself, you say, well, I'm going out, or maybe I'm going to the store or something like that. I would wear a mask, and I certainly would encourage neighbors to. I don't know that I can even find something that would be adequate and as simple as that. And then you go all the way to the production of ventilators, which according to medical professionals is vital. And we are literally tens of thousands behind what we might need.
Correct. So first of all, you couldn't find a mask right now. And if you do have a mask, if you can buy a mask, you shouldn't buy it, because unless you're sick, you shouldn't be wearing one. Right now, the need is for healthcare professionals. Look, the main issue that we're trying to do right now is mitigation. We were not able to avert the crisis. Again, the national government and this person who's in the White House bears personal responsibility because he took apart a work group whose responsibility it is, or it was, I should say, responsibility it was to find and identify potential pandemics around the world and be able to defend against them. So those people, that group of people was disbanded by this guy in the White House. And then when eventually it got here to the US, it was left unchecked for a whole month to grow and exponentially, it could grow exponentially. So right now we are past the point where we can stop the pandemic. The best that we can do at this moment is, you've heard the phrase, flatten the curve. That means that there is a certain capacity that the healthcare system has. Any pandemic has a trajectory, that's a curve. If we do not flatten the curve, then if the trajectory is like this, and this is the capacity of the healthcare system, which is what is happening, it will overwhelm the healthcare system. If we flatten the curve, it's not that we're going to get less cases, but we're going to get them over a longer period of time. So it means that we test the capacity of the healthcare system, but hopefully do not go over it. Unfortunately, as the numbers today, now that we've gotten testing, to at least some point, that's acceptable, what the numbers have demonstrated is that we're on a straight trajectory upwards, and we're not anywhere near the top of it. I fear, I'm very concerned. I think that I need to be honest with you, Gary. I think that this is going to have an impact not only in the Bronx, not only in New York, and not only across the country, but our world. And I'm not even being not exaggerating here. I think that we're going to have between 1.5 and 2 million people who die in the United States as a direct result. I think that we will have the economic impact of this will be biblical, and we need to be prepared for what that means for us as a country and as a society. And this is not an exaggeration.
When you and I first had dialogue about having you come on Bronx Talk, we were not in the middle of this, and we were we were going to talk about little issues like like universal health care or
That's not a little issue. That's not a little issue.
I said that sarcastically, of course. Yeah. Does the health committee have any position here or anything other than because you are the chair of the Senate's health committee, or are you just gathering information and doing what you can to move it around like we're doing right now?
Well, this is at this point in this type of situation, the executive needs to be an executive, and that is what the governor is doing better than the president and the mayor, as an example, and that's what every governor and mayor is doing around the country. Some of them better than others. So the executive is the one that moves most swiftly in this type of situation. My role, first of all, is a constituent service provider. Our office is still virtually open. It is opened virtually, which means that if you call the number for my office, 718-933-2034, you will be connected to one of my staffers who is working remotely. And if you email my office, grivera@nysenate.gov, you will be connected to somebody from my staff. So we're still trying to help constituents. So my job as a service provider to my constituency, that is one of the first things I do. Second, gather information and distribute it as much as I can. Third, make connections with resources. When I find, there's when somebody I got a call this morning from a doctor who had some credible information about a burst of cases somewhere in the Hudson Valley. So I managed to make some calls and make some connections to the local senator and some of the leadership of that particular village, and they're dealing with it now. So that type of thing is what I'm doing. And then just doing things like this, having conversations with people in any medium that I can to provide them information and to provide them clarity, because this is the time we need to be concerned and we need to be smart. We know we can't be panicky or fearful. We have to be honest about what we're facing. but we have to be unified in how we deal with it. And that is part of my job as I see it, is to try to provide that clarity and that leadership.
What are your Bronx constituents saying? Are you receiving calls? Are you receiving emails? And I mean, the obvious, can I get tested? Where can I get tested? What do I do with X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
But are there things that stand out that you say, gee, somebody called with this sort of problem or this sort of question?
Well, there's a lot of questions, and I'll be honest with you, my interaction with my staff, because I've been up in Albany and I've been dealing with budget issues and making these high-end connections. We've talked a little bit, but they tell me that constituents are not calling as much as I would hope they do. I think that they don't necessarily know that we are open or available, which is why I'm thankful to you to get this information out. But people have been asking a lot of questions about basic things like, how are they going to feed themselves? You know, are supermarkets going to close? Are senior centers going to close? You know, what issues do they have with their landlord? There's things that we have done to address that. You know, we've suspended evictions for residential properties, and we're working on convincing the governor to rescind evictions for commercial properties, which is going to be essential for whatever for whatever happens when we return from this. We've passed a bill related to paid sick leave. We are shortened the time period so that people can get unemployment. I mean, so there's a lot of things that we are doing and considering, and above all, trying to get the federal government, because this is, by the way, this is, you know, they say that there are no atheists in foxholes.
I've never heard that, but that's interesting.
You've never heard that. There are no atheists in foxholes, but there are apparently no libertarians during a pandemic. So those people who believe that the state, as in government, is not necessary or should be minimized, have to admit that it is in these moments where we see what public goods actually are. This is a crisis that is beyond individuals, that is beyond corporations, that is beyond even local governments. We have to operate. This is the reason why governments exist and why the national government exists. I am not saying that we should have anything that's authoritarian, but we have common goods. We have public goods that we need to acknowledge are the ones that will maintain us during this type of crisis, which is why when you said earlier about universal health care, I'm going to tell you right now, this is precisely why it is essential to pass a single payer system in this country and in this state. We have a system in which you can guarantee healthcare to people, and all the responses, right, during normal times. How are we going to afford this? This is too complicated, etc. Look at what's happening right now, where the national government was able to, with a snap of the fingers, produce $1.5 trillion to provide liquidity in the market. But it can't find the same amount of money to forgive student loans. It can't find the same amount of money to provide access to universal health care to people. We are in a moment where we will be tested as a people and as a government. And I believe that we have a moral obligation to step up and say, this crisis, something like this, will happen again. What are we going to do then? Are we going to rely? Certainly we can rely on each other, but there is a reason why governments exist. And there's a reason why we have a responsibility, I believe, to call for the things that seem radical. At this moment, does universal healthcare seem radical to you? Does it seem radical to any of our listeners, to people who are watching?
Senator, I do want to talk a little bit about businesses and the economic.
I'm sorry I went on a rant.
No.
I'm sorry about that.
I know we're all very passionate about these things. One of the things that I've been thinking about is that, and you know, we're all looking to the day, whenever that is, sooner the better, that we get past this, is what are we going to be like? And one of the things that you've already articulated, it seems very clear to me that we are all going to have a better understanding of the importance of healthcare. And if you can't see it now, I don't know whenever you're going to see it. And the other thing is, you know, I guess the best historical comparison would be FDR and what he did with the New Deal. All those who are talking about socialism or whatever else, of course, you know, the federal government pledging to give money to, you know, for want of a better term, a handout to, citizens across the country. That is actually what, in essence, what social, what is so-called socialism is. And it seems to me there will have to be a swing in that direction. We're going to need to fund infrastructure development to help create jobs. We're going to need to fund businesses so that they can either recover or stay afloat, and do that kind of incentive funding to, I hate to say it, create a new society, because this one has kind of, I don't want to say broke down.
This is the way that I have put it. We have been for a long time incredibly privileged in this country by the fact that we can go to supermarket and find 50 different types of cereal to choose from. And facts like that have obscured from the majority of people the reality that the majority of people were near the brink this entire time. There are entire sectors of society that have been holding on for dear life while the inequality has gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. But because we can choose between Cookie Crisp and 7 different types of Frosted Flakes, we kind of ignore that. We can't ignore it anymore. What we will have happen to us in the next week, in the next month, and for years to come, because of what's going to happen right now, the impact that we're going to feel is reality smacking us in the face. We've had a society that for too long has taken and suggested that some people, obviously, if they're poor, if they're dispossessed, if they're not don't have access to certain things, it's because they haven't worked hard enough, because they just haven't done enough with their own life, that we have no responsibility to them. Guess what, folks?
I know you're saying that sarcastically.
That's correct. That's what I'm saying. That it is, we do have a responsibility to each other. We do have a responsibility to create a system and a world in which those people who are dispossessed, guess what? That could be you within a month, within a day. There was somebody who said, you wouldn't be a millionaire because of something that happens to you unless you win the lottery. You're not going to become a millionaire overnight because of something that happens weird in a month. But you can become homeless if something weird happens in a month and you lose your job, you lose your home. You lose your home. And so what I'm saying is, this is the moment that we have to, and there might be, I'm hoping that everyone who watches this doesn't just kind of chuckle at the screen, shake their head, and then turn on and see, a rerun of the Kardashians. I would hope that anybody who is watching is thinking about this right now. This is the moment when we as a society have to step up. We have to make sure that we change our system so that something like this, which will happen again, does not impact us the way that is going to be impacted. By the way, this is going to air on Monday. Is this going to air on Monday?
Monday night. Things will have changed between this Friday.
Between now and Monday, which is Friday, we will have Saturday, Sunday, and Monday. By that point, people might not be watching this because they will be trying to catch up on the news about how the healthcare system is collapsing around us.
Or God forbid, they could be themselves in a health situation. I hadn't anticipated going here, but one of the things I've been thinking about is the size of our society. And we look at, listen, you're a sports fan, I'm a sports fan. We look at the teams that have canceled. When they come back, whenever it is, there are going to be so many people who are financially hurting. There's no way they can charge the same price for tickets, the same, $12.95 for a beer at Yankee Stadium, for all the other things. And I'll go to cell phone providers and all the other things that are now so exorbitant, the loans that students are paying. There is no way you're going to be able to take your family to a ball game. I mean, other than some people who have a large reserve, but even some of those people are losing their restaurants and all those kinds of things. You're not going to be able to, at $50 a ticket, take 4 people to a ball game for $200 and then spend another $100 at the ballpark and $20 for a ticket. I'm not only talking about sports, I'm talking about everything. I think the society as a whole, number one, is too big, and it's, aside from the health situation, literally collapsing on the weight of itself. And we're going to have to shrink it down to a more manageable position. And if the fat, I don't usually talk political theory here, but to me, if the fat in the financial picture is somewhere, that's going to have to shrink, because I don't see us having any sort of survival without it.
I think this is what we will see in the next couple of weeks and months. Somebody else said to me, this is what we're seeing right now. It's as if though a hurricane has struck the entire world. What we're seeing is I saw this in Puerto Rico, a version of this in Puerto Rico. I'm from there, born and raised. Many of folks who might be watching this know it. And 2 years ago, when we had the storm, when we had the Hurricane Maria that hit there, the impact of that and the failure of government there, both local government and the federal government, and how people kind of came together and what it made them realize about society, I saw it in a micro way. What we will see in the next few months and years is this in a macro way, because this is something that's impacting everybody. It is around the world. And we are supposed to be the richest, best, and most prepared nation in the world. And what we're going to experience is that all of those things are going to be tested. All of that is going to be tested. And we're going to have to figure out how we respond as individuals, as communities, as a state, as a federal government. We're going to have to do all of that. I know that New Yorkers are prepared. I know that Bronxites who are defined by their resilience are prepared. I just want to make sure that everybody's clear-eyed about what we're going to have to face in the coming months.
Let's bring the dialogue back to some of the specifics. Los Angeles talked about shelter in place. Governor of New York has talked about shelter in place. What does that mean?
Yeah.
Is this a proper answer? Some people say, and I've heard it, it swings from both sides. Some people say, there's no way we can do it. Is it really necessary? And on the other hand, there are many people who say, that's it. I'm not going out. I'm not doing anything.
Yeah, I got you.
What's your perspective?
So I'm going like this because I'm looking at my phone. There was a press conference that was happening as we were getting on this call, and so there's a friend of mine who was texting me this as far as the parameters. So first of all, we're not talking about road closures. We're not talking about military checkpoints or anything of that nature. So get that out of your mind. What we're talking about here is, as much as possible, stay home. Interact with as few people as possible, because we're trying to, again, remember, flatten the curve. We're basically trying to keep the capacity of the healthcare system so that it can manage the people that are truly sick. All right. If you feel sick, stay at home. Don't go anywhere. Make sure that you interact, again, with as few people as possible. And unless your temperature goes up, like if your temperature goes up about 102, that as an example, then you should seek hospitalization or care. But if not, for most people, it's going to be like they're just going to feel like crap. It's like going to be like a flu. Stay at home and just suck it up. Now you can still
interject about that. So if you are an ill person, and
Yep.
most of us in the Bronx live with somebody or people in their apartments, as I understand from health officials I saw last night, you have literally got to keep yourself in your room by yourself and not interact with your own family, because they could already be in danger, but you certainly don't want to make a larger chance. We got about a minute, so go ahead.
Got a minute. So it's like specific rules, like remain indoors, go outside for solitary exercise if you're going to run, walk your dog, whatever. Pre-screen visitors if you can by taking their temperature. Don't visit households with multiple people. Everyone in the presence of a vulnerable person should wear a mask. So anybody who's sick should get other people masks if they can. Don't take public transport if necessary. And listen, ultimately, be smart. Make sure to wash your hands for 20 seconds. Interact with as few people as possible. When you're going to cough or sneeze, do it onto your elbow, like so. And just, if you're sick, stay home. But for the most part, seek out information in credible places, and breathe deeply and realize that you have to support other people in your community. So check in on elderly, etc. And just prepare yourself. But again, if there's anybody that can get through this, Bronxites can. Bronxites are resilient people, bro. They're resilient.
Senator, we really appreciate your time during these trying times. I have a feeling we'll get back to you at some point.
I'll be in front of. I'll be here or with my computer someplace else, so you'll always be able to get a hold of me.
Well, we're doing the same thing here. Thanks to our producers, Helen Greenberg. Thanks to Michael Max for helping us figure out how to get this done. And we'll see you next week on Bronx Talk and all the stations. Yes, stay strong in the Bronx.
Stay strong in the Bronx.
You travel safely and be well, Senator.